Patricia Okoye scored 199 points in the Family Feud Fast Money round, 1 point away from $20,000 for her 12-year-old son's spinal surgery. She did the round in a motorized wheelchair, answering 5 questions in 60 seconds with a voice that had learned to be precise because her body could not always afford to repeat itself. When Steve Harvey read the total and the board showed 199, Patricia closed her eyes for 3 seconds. That was all. 3 seconds, eyes closed, the way a person closes their eyes when they have received news they were afraid of and have decided in advance not to fall apart in public. She opened them. She said, "It's okay." She said it to no one in particular. Steve Harvey stood at the podium, and he did not speak. He did not move. He held his cards at his side, and he stood completely still for 11 seconds, which is an eternity on live television, and then he set his cards down on the podium, and he walked to where Patricia was sitting in her wheelchair, and he knelt beside her on the stage floor, and he said, "Patricia, look at me." She looked. He said, "1 point does not define what I just watched you do." It was a Monday afternoon in October 2020, and Patricia Okoye had driven herself from Nashville, Tennessee to Atlanta in her adapted vehicle, a minivan with hand controls and a lift that sometimes jammed on the left side, with her son Kwame, 12, in the back seat, and her sister Rita, 44, beside her. Patricia had been living with multiple sclerosis since she was 24. She was now 41. She had spent 17 years negotiating with a body that did not always do what she asked of it, and she had become expert at the particular form of problem-solving that comes from needing to find a different way to do nearly every ordinary thing. She worked as a medical transcriptionist from home, which allowed her to keep hours she could manage and to stop when she needed to stop. She had raised Kwame alone since he was 3. Kwame Okoye had been diagnosed with adolescent idiopathic scoliosis at age 9. At 9, the curve in his spine was 28 degrees, concerning but manageable with a brace. By 11, it had progressed to 47 degrees. By 12, it was 59 degrees, and his orthopedic surgeon had used the word urgent in October 2019 and the phrase structural compromise in February 2020, which Patricia had looked up when she got home and had sat very still after reading. The surgery, a posterior spinal fusion, would correct the curve and stop the progression. The cost, between the surgeon, the anesthesiologist, the facility, and the post-operative care, was approximately $42,000. Patricia's insurance covered 68%. The remaining gap was just over $13,000. She had been saving for 14 months. She had $1,240 in the fund. She had applied to Family Feud 11 months earlier, on a Wednesday night when Kwame was asleep, and the house was quiet, and she was sitting in her chair at the kitchen table, going through numbers that never added up no matter how many times she arranged them. She filled out the application with the same precise, careful efficiency she brought to everything. Methodical, complete, unsentimental. She listed herself as the primary player. She listed Rita as backup. She did not tell Kwame she had applied, because she did not want to give him a reason to hope before she knew there was something to hope about. She had told Kwame about the surgery a year before, in the direct and patient way that she told him about everything that mattered. She had explained the diagnosis, the progression, the timeline, and the cost without softening any of it. Kwame had listened. He had asked 2 questions. The first was whether it would hurt. She said yes, but manageable, and that she would be there every single day. The second question was, how are we going to pay for it? She said, "I'm working on it." He looked at her for a moment and then nodded. The way he nodded when he had accepted an answer that he knew was incomplete but trusted was honest. He had not asked again. Not in 11 months. But Patricia had heard him. At night, when he thought she was asleep, doing the things she had taught him not to do, searching on his phone. She had heard the particular silence of a child looking something up that they are afraid to find. She did not say anything about it, because she was doing the same thing herself, every night, at the kitchen table in the quiet house. The insurance had denied the surgery once in April 2020, citing it as elective orthopedic procedure, not meeting urgent criteria under current coverage tier. Patricia had read the letter twice. Then she had called the insurance company. She had been transferred 4 times. The 4th person she spoke to had read from a script and used the phrase, "Please resubmit," with additional documentation in 3 separate sentences. Patricia had submitted additional documentation. Her son's most recent imaging, 2 letters from his surgeon, and a letter from his pediatrician. The second decision was pending. She had not told Kwame about the denial. She had told him instead that the paperwork was still being processed. She said, "These things take time, baby," he said. "Okay, Mom." And nobody in that studio knew she was carrying any of this. But that wasn't even the part that broke Steve Harvey's composure completely. Rita had answered first in the fast money round, earning 81 points in 60 seconds. A solid score, but the kind that puts enormous pressure on the anchor. Patricia went second. She positioned her wheelchair at the podium. She adjusted the microphone herself, efficiently, one smooth motion. Steve Harvey had offered to help with the microphone. She had said, without breaking her composure, "I've got it. Thank you." The audience had applauded. She had not acknowledged the applause because she was already focused on the timer. She answered all 5 questions in 54 seconds, with 6 seconds to spare. 4 of her answers matched the survey. The 5th, name something you check on a car before a long trip. She had answered hand controls, which was a deeply personal answer that was also deeply incorrect in terms of survey data. The audience had not laughed. They had understood, in the particular intuitive way that audiences understand things that are said honestly, that she had given the most truthful answer available to her. The total appeared, 199. Patricia closed her eyes for 3 seconds. Then she opened them and said, "To the room and to no one, it's okay." And that wasn't even the part. The part came 15 seconds later, when Kwame, who had been sitting in the front row of the audience with his grandmother, stood up from his seat and said, across the full length of the studio, in a voice that was trying to be steady, "Mom, it's okay. I'll wear the brace longer." The studio fell completely silent. 300 people stopped breathing at the same moment. A camera operator lowered his camera. A sound technician pulled off his headphones. Steve Harvey's cards hit the podium. He stood at the podium for 11 seconds without speaking. Then he set the cards down. He walked to Patricia. He knelt beside her wheelchair. He said, "Patricia, look at me." She looked. He said, "1 point does not define what I just watched you do." He stayed on one knee. He turned his head to look at Kwame. He said, "Son, come here." Kwame left his seat and came to the stage. Steve stood up and put his hand on Kwame's shoulder. He said to Patricia, "Tell me, how long has he been carrying this?" Patricia said, "He doesn't know how much." Steve looked at Kwame. He said, "Son, I'm going to tell you something right now that I need you to actually hear. When I was a young man, I watched my mother carry things alone that she never should have had to carry. She carried them because she thought protecting me meant hiding from me. And the thing I wish more than anything, is that I could have told her when I was 12 years old, 'I see you. I see what you're doing.'" He stopped. Your mother just drove here from Nashville, by herself. In a car she drives with her hands because her legs don't work the way everyone else's do. She answered 5 questions in 54 seconds. She scored 199 points. And the only reason she fell 1 point short is because she told the most honest answer she could. He looked at the audience. That is not failure. I don't know what you want to call it, but I know what it is. It is the definition of showing up completely. He wasn't done. Steve pulled out his phone. He called his personal attorney live on stage. He said, I need you to contact Patricia Okoye's insurance provider and initiate an emergency appeal for her son's surgical approval today, and I need you to authorize payment from my personal account for the full remaining gap, whatever the insurance doesn't cover, for Kwame Okoye's procedure. Whatever it is. He listened. He said, all of it. No ceiling. He held up his hand. There was more. He looked at the competing family, the Carter family from Memphis, and said, You have been extraordinary today. You played the game the right way, and you've been kind people in this room. You're both getting the prize. Harold Carter, the patriarch of the competing family, walked across the stage, shook Patricia's hand, and said, Get your boy fixed up. That's all that matters. When the episode aired 9 weeks later, the moment Kwame stood up from the audience and said, I'll wear the brace longer, had been viewed over 360 million times. The hashtag 199NotFailure trended in 26 countries. Disability rights organizations across the United States named the episode the most visible mainstream representation of a disabled parent's invisible daily burden in the history of American daytime television. 3 months after the taping, Kwame Okoye's surgery was completed successfully at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. The spinal fusion corrected his curve from 59 degrees to 12. His surgeon described the outcome as excellent. Patricia drove to the hospital alone and was there when he woke up from anesthesia. Kwame's first words to her, before he was fully conscious, were, Mom, did we win? Patricia took his hand and said, Yes, baby, we won. A year after the taping, Steve Harvey established the 199 Foundation, named for the score, with a mission to provide insurance gap funding for families with disabled parents facing medical crises. The motto was a direct quote from Kwame's audience moment, I'll carry it longer. In its first year, the foundation funded treatment gaps for over 700 families. Patricia Okoye was named to the foundation's advisory board. Today, Kwame is 13 and stands straighter than he ever has. He and his mother drive to the grocery store on Saturday mornings in the adapted minivan with a lift that still sometimes jams on the left side. Patricia drives with both hands steady on the hand controls. Kwame sits in the passenger seat. Sometimes he reaches over and adjusts the radio to something she doesn't like. She lets him. 199 points in any other frame is a near miss. In this one, it is the precise number that proved that a mother who cannot walk can still carry everything. And a boy who stood up from an audience and said, I'll wear the brace longer. A 12-year-old who had been searching his phone alone at night for answers had already been carrying everything alongside her all along. If Patricia and Kwame's story moved you, subscribe and hit that thumbs up. Share this with someone who needs to know that the people who show up the most completely are often the ones the system sees the least. Have you ever watched someone carry something invisible for someone they love? Tell us in the comments. And ring the notification bell for more stories that remind us what real strength looks like.